so-called flying saucers.
There's a whole fleet of them. Look on the ASA. It's rotating.
Welcome to Kill the Stigma. This video is consolidated into two parts. I did some of it yesterday, last night, and I did some of it today. So that's why you're gonna see me with two different shirts. And I kind of like go on a, I don't want to say a tangent, but if I were you, I would listen to the end where like, and I've noticed I do that a lot of my videos where like I put like a lot of good stuff in the end. And there's some very interesting information there. I'm gonna start with this YouTube channel that I found, and I highly suggest you guys check him out because he's got information that no one talks about anymore in ufology, like nobody. And it's on a bunch of topics that I found very interesting. It doesn't have many subscribers, so you guys should definitely check that channel out. I will present this video with an end with like the highlight of some of what he found. But in that video that he has, just on that one, he names a lot more people that are very interesting. And yeah, that's enough of that. I also want to say Tom DeLonge has kind of a very dark view on the phenomena, but he also has this perspective of like, you are like, what you perceive in your attitude is everything. So like, he does have like a hopeful part of reality, right? And as far as the phenomenon being negative and all that, I don't think it is. And I will present here things that are not like solid evidence, but something that could suggest that there's a battle between whatever these things are. And it's interesting. I think that's exactly what's going on. So that's all I'll say. Everything I will link below. Jason Somoza, I will link below. I'm gonna present from John Greenwald's video. YouTube channel, I will link that below. Some of Jesse Michaels. And then this channel, it's called Mindseat TV, which he presents a bunch of UFO videos and UAP videos and other stuff. And sometimes I think he gets, it's not like, sometimes I think he gets pretty close. Other times not that much. So I will have that all linked down below. Thanks for listening, and I hope you guys had a good weekend.
This is a way for you to come up and see a little bit about what we're doing. And I said, oh my God, I would love to. And he said, do you want to come and introduce the head of the company? Then I said, I will if I get to sit with him for 5 minutes, because I knew exactly who these engineers were. I just said, hey, I have an idea for a project, and this project will reverse the cynicism that people have about government. And I said, can I come up in a couple weeks and tell you more about it? Absolutely. So a couple weeks go by, then I come back up, and so I walk in, and they're sitting there. I had no plan for even bringing up UFOs then either. I was smarter than that. So we're talking, and one person did a bunch of research on me. Halfway through the conversation, this person says, so what about all the conspiracy stuff that you're into? I tried to talk my way out of it, and then in comes the head of the company. I said, you know, you come in at a very interesting part of the conversation. This person brought up, you know, the whole UFO issue with me. I just want you to know that I don't plan on, you know, treating that disrespectfully with this project. And the head guy says, we cannot be involved with anything to do with that subject, especially since there has been absolutely no evidence whatsoever that it exists. I said, sir, can I speak to you for 5 minutes alone? And he goes, sure. I just go, this is exactly what I said. I want you to understand something. I understand the national security implications about what I'm about to say. I am not naive to the topic. I think if you hear me out, you're going to see that there's merit in what I'm about to propose. And he goes, well, what topic are you talking about? I go, UFOs, sir. And so then I just laid out this entire secret machines project. And I said, if you allow me to do this, what I'm trying to do, that I'm going to ask you for some help. I need advisors. I need people to help guide me so I don't keep disinforming people. So I said, I'm going to send you something. I want you to read it, and please, if you find anything about it good, just respond any way you can. He goes, okay.
All right, so next point that we've got to cover. What is this Secret Machines project that Tom is talking about? If you go back and listen to the early interviews with Tom, even in 2011 and 2014, he had certain conversations. He talked about this idea of creating a project which could help communicate to the youth something about the truth of UFOs, because Tom's always been fascinated in this subject. So in early interviews, you can hear him starting to express this idea and toy with it. But by the 2016 period, this idea had reached a level of maturity. Now, there's all sorts of bits and pieces associated with this plan that he had, but by far the most ingenious part is this. Tom's idea was to create fiction and non-fiction books on the UFO topic, and then using his celebrity, find people within the defense and intelligence community, within the aerospace community, within the Pentagon, and say to them, look, I'm not here to be rude to you. I'm not here to say that you're hiding something. I'm just here to show you my book and to ask if you have any advice or pointers if I'm in the right direction or the wrong direction. Share your ideas and I will never reveal who you are. That was his idea. And actually, if you think about it, it's absolutely ingenious, because if this stuff is really going on, just work with me here for a second. Imagine that UFOs are real, that there is something out there, and that there has been an attempt to cover it up for whatever reason. I'm not here to explain what that is. We don't have to cover it. But imagine if that's going on and there are people actually responsible for this issue. Can you imagine some of the things they might have learned by this point? Maybe they have made contacts. Maybe they have worked out that there's something out there. Again, let's just say that it's real. If those people did exist, surely they would be absolutely dying to share some of the fascinating, bizarre, and even worrying things that they've learned. And so what better way to help them get that out than giving them a layer of plausible deniability? Tom DeLonge comes along and he sounds kind of crazy and he's talking about all this stuff and he writes these books and he's saying, I have these advisors in the background who are helping me to write this stuff, but those advisors are never revealed to the public, or at least they shouldn't be. So that's what he's talking about when he says there's this Secret Machines project that he lays out for the person who I think we can reasonably assume to be Robert Weiss in this meeting. Back to Tom.
And then the meeting was done. So what I did was, the nonfiction books that we've been working on right next to the Secret Machines novel in parallel it's a thesis of the UFO phenomenon. So I took the prologue to that thesis and I sent it to him. Well, 2 weeks later, I get this email and it says, I want you to be next to the Pentagon at this date and this time. You're going to be meeting somebody from the CIA. And so I was like, oh my God, it's working. So I get on a plane and I fly out.
So today we're going to be talking about gatekeepers again. Gatekeepers. What are you, what are you protecting? I want to know. I want to go why the consistent stonewalling, even with everything that's been going on. I mean, the flap is nuts. Now, it seemed to have kind of slowed down a bit. Not, in the sense where everybody was seeing these things in late November 2024. Interestingly, it started right after Immaculate Constellation and the hearing with Lou Elizondo and Mike Gold, Michael Schoenberger, and Tim Galladay. Right after that, they say, one of the things they said is like, Immaculate Constellation will put you in a list. Nancy Mace was like, come at me, bro. But, I don't know if that's connected or not. Sometimes I wonder, because I know that Lou Elizondo has said that that could be one of the reasons they don't disclose. Said it in Kurt Jamunga on Theories of Everything. In part 2, I think it was. Part 2 maybe, when he asked him why the secret.
National security perspective. And there's a thing out there, and it doesn't show that it's being benevolent. So it's only one of two other options, either malevolent or it's like us. And we see this very careful ISR surveillance of our nuclear equities. It's interested in nuclear equities. Well, some may look at that as what we call preparation for the battlefield. Okay. And let's just say hypothetically, there's a 10% chance, US has a 10% chance that these things are bad, or one day they're going to come here in force and they're looking at us, right? Remember, you're putting on your national security hat. So forget about everything else for a moment. Your job is to be paranoid. And there's a small remote chance that these things are not good. And maybe there is a plan for these things at some point to come in force in 50 years from now. And if the mere fact you have this conversation with the American people, what's going to happen? Well, the American people are going to start getting prepared. Well, I can tell you in real life combat situations, when we send in long range surveillance LRS teams, behind enemy lines, the moment the enemy finds out that we know that they know we're there, the element of surprise is over. And so ultimately, hypothetically, imagine a scenario where maybe we had 50 years to prepare for something, but now that the cat's out of the bag, that existential action will happen tomorrow. And by the way, we're not ready for it. We're not prepared for it. We don't have a countermeasure. We don't have a capability to counter this. And so from a very real perspective, a national security perspective, the mere fact that you are acknowledging the existence of something may predicate an action or an act that you're not prepared to have right now. And so I encourage you and your listeners to just for a moment, I'm not asking you to be a national security person, but I'm asking you to suspend your personal beliefs right now for just a moment and put yourself in somebody else's shoes who does feel that way, right? Now, what do? If the mere fact of talking about this could potentially cause a reaction that you're not ready for as a country, as a civilization, right? Maybe that's the reason why you decide to only brief certain presidents who have a background in intelligence. Maybe they were former directors of CIA, but the other presidents who are career politicians will be, they're here today, gone in 4 years. Maybe you can't even risk telling them. And so maybe the reason why this has been kept secret so long is actually, in a weird sense, some sort of sense of patriotism by people. And maybe that's how they justify it. And I'll leave that at that as a counterpoint of forcing people to think maybe a little bit non-traditionally. Now, do I think if that happened to ever be the case, that's a good explanation? No. I still think that we have to be honest with the American people. It's like I've said this before, it's like going to the doctor. Just because I have cancer, it's bad news. Don't keep that from me. I want to know, because maybe there's a chance I can do something about it, right? And so, but
That's also said in one of my favorite books, Secret Machines, A Fire Within, chapter 14, where this guy in a suit comes and steps in, and he's the same guy that comes in with crop circles and cattle mutilations, and the sheriff wants to disclose, and the guy in the suit tells him, gives him a comparison of the crop circle and the cattle mutilations. And he also talks about abductees which have terrible experiences, and he says how the crop circles are beautiful messages of something that's interested in us, trying to communicate, trying to understand us, and that's the way they reach out. And then he mentions the cattle mutilations and some terrifying abductions, and he compares them. How do you think that person felt with that experience, or how do you think, those cattle or whatever? Point is, and he also talked about missing people that have disappeared strangely. And the sheriff is like, I'm gonna go public, and the guy in the suit tells him, I don't think you are, because the point he made was, the more you talk about it, whatever is out there watching us, the more you talk about it, the more we risk of whatever is coming accelerating. And when it comes, we have to be ready. Now, I'm not a promoter for Secret Machines, but from Jake Barber to Matthew Brown, the recent whistleblower, there's so much there that's so similar. It's crazy. It's nuts.
Where all the information is just dumped out there by an adversary or non-human intelligence to create societal disruption. All right, so this is an important slide, because if we want to facilitate this board doing its work, then the barriers that impede that need to be lowered. And so you need to understand what the impediments are to disclosure. And so there's 6 reasons for non-disclosure: national security, lack of a plan, societal disruption, covert agreement, cover for misdeeds, and organizational intransigence. And you could just derive this from first principles. And so a lot of this has been talked about already, but let's look at societal disruption. Challenge to existing authority structures, ontological shock, market crash, false authority syndrome, stagnation of initiative. All of these are issues that are preventing disclosure. They're they're going to impact the play.
So, number 4 is the craziest one for me. Covert agreement, accelerated negative repercussions. What? What are you talking about? I mean, obviously we do have agreements with other governments about what to do about UFOs, I guarantee it. But no, that sounds like NHI, it says NHI quid pro quo. What? And accelerated negative repercussions. And then you see the more disclosure you get. And then it's crazy. It's like something happens. So I just want you guys to keep an eye on that, because I don't want to sound like I'm going crazy and I'm seeing patterns when there's not. Another big case was the Phoenix Lights in 1997. You can think about what was going on in 1997, and there was an effort to disclose, but it wasn't like as mainstream. It was more behind the scenes. But you know what was interesting? The ridicule and the ridiculous Roswell case closed came like right after those sightings. And it was the most absurd story, which I'm not gonna get into, but it was just weird timing, like how the Air Force decided to release that right after the Phoenix Lights. I don't know, maybe I'm seeing things where there's not, maybe it's just coincidences, but could there be a connection? And by the way, if Lelazon is right about this, I just want to say, absolutely, I support what he's doing. I can also tell you what he did. He created a bunker. And he's like, you know, you can use bunker for other things, bro. Okay, you know, I don't know. I think you're concerned about something happening, but I'm not gonna get apocalyptic. Not ever gonna promote the year 2027. Predictions never come true. But there's a flap, and there's a weirder, that the whole mystery drone flap thing, I'm gonna try, don't go on too much of a tangent. I'm gonna try to keep it simple. Does not make any geopolitical sense. It does not. The United States has the most insane intelligence system where it just wouldn't work. Chinese balloon. Yeah, you're right, but you're right, but we caught that right and we shot it down. Then other stuff started happening. Not gonna get into those, but those were kind of weird. It's almost like they learned a lesson, because now we're not shooting these things down. Now we just let them do what just leave them alone. Leave them alone. Don't even shoot them. You know what? They can even be in Washington, D.C. Remember like what happened in 1952? Well, that doesn't happen today. Today, they can go to D.C. Silence. And that happened. That happened less than a year ago. This is real, especially that last one with the orbs around the Capitol, but these things were all over the place, including my state, Minnesota. Okay, middle of nowhere. Why would they be here? Why? I've seen them multiple times. I'll put one video of when during the flap was going on. Just whatever. It's not solid proof, but we gotta get past that.
Fucking quiet. God damn it, man. Fuck, that's weird, dude.
congressional record this 12-page document that Michael Schellenberger brought today that describes the Immaculate Constellation government program. So we will do that now. Every member up here has a copy of it. The first section talks about the unacknowledged special access program called Immaculate Constellation, and the second section about USG imagery intelligence. And Representative Luna just told me if I say Immaculate Constellation, I'll be on some list, maybe a FISA warrant. So come at me, bro, I guess. But without objection, entered in the record. All right, so.
I apologize for the different angle, but just me going out on a limb here, I can imagine where it's like, Immaculate Constellation puts you on a list, then the Galactic Federation gets divided. There's problems, and there's a group that's like, no, they're not ready. Then there's another group that's like, you know what, we're going in. You're not going in. You're not going. Whatever. I'm so silly. I know I sound so silly, but look what happened after this hearing.
Motherfucker. Something's going up real fast. A plane? I can't tell what it is. Whoa, is that moving quick? That could be a drone. I don't know what the hell that is. But that is quick. There's only one remaining right now. Whatever that green flashing one is, he moved quick around it to get it.
And watch what happens next. Take a look at this.
He's like right there with it. Go, ooh, he's like right on it. Ooh, that whatever it was just shot down the drone. If that was a drone.
So, and speaking of that, I will touch on Tom DeLonge today a little bit and his advisors. But before I do that, I want to read something from the UAP Disclosure Act of 2023 real quick. Now this bill that got gutted by Mike Turner, specifically, and Mike Rounds, but specifically Mike Turner. Mike Turner was the one that went on Need the News and attacked David Grush, his credibility, and then he wouldn't take any answers. He wouldn't, take any questions. He just didn't explain why he gutted the bill. And Mike Turner is the district of Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, which has a huge connection all the way back to 1947, the Roswell crash. So, in this documents, this legislation, they set everything up. And by the way, I love Tim Burchett, but with his UAP amendments, they're just not enough. This is a complicated topic, and it's what has 66 pages. And they do highlight things that are kind of important. Like, for example, if you read all the people all the agencies they want information from, when they reach a certain part that's important, they will say especially. Like they're saying the Department of Defense and its progenitors, Department of War, and the Department of the Navy, Department of the Army, Department of the Navy, and then look at this, Department of the Air Force. Then they say, specifically the Air Force of Special Investigations, not to go on a tangent, but that's kind of like rumored to be part of the Men in Black, and people that are witnesses get treated terribly, which is interesting and sad and messed up. Then they go into the Department of Energy, the Manhattan Project, the Atomic Energy Commission and Energy Research and Development Administration. They just have a bunch of stuff here. And then they go into making this panel, a 9-person panel, which I've heard a few people don't want that, because if you're gonna set up another panel, like what, from the government, but they make it clear has had no previous or current involvement with any legacy program or controlling authority to the collection, exploitation, or reverse engineering of technologies of unknown origin, or the examination of biological evidence of living, deceased, or non-human intelligence. They also say when they do transfer the records to this group, that transfer of all its records to the archivist for inclusion the collection, and no record of the review board shall be destroyed. So they can't destroy any documents like they did with Roswell in 1947 for the GAO, General Accounting Office. That's something they did. Anyway, Gatekeepers says basically how the legacy program has been affecting this whole this disclosure process. So we go back to the disclosure war. Now, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Why don't we keep that in mind? And let's go over history.
Goldwater, a former Air Force general who also served as chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, would presumably have the power and the clearance to see anything in the military's arsenal. But when Goldwater asked to see the so-called Blue Room, where UFO material is supposedly stored, during a visit to Wright-Patterson Air Base in Ohio, he was told by General Curtis LeMay that it was none of his business.
But I think that at Wright-Patterson Field, if you could get into certain places, you'd find out what the Air Force and the government knows about UFOs. Reportedly, a spaceship landed, and it was all hushed up, quieted, and nobody have never heard about much of it. I called Curtis LeMay and I said, General, I know we have a room at Wright-Patterson where you put all this secret stuff. Could I go in there? I've never heard him get mad, but he got madder than hell at me.
And he should never ask again. Former Nevada Senator Howard Cannon is one of Goldwater's closest friends and says he and Goldwater discussed UFOs and the Blue Room several times.
What Barry wanted to do is get in and find out, what did they have? What could they say? When you say he was turned down, I'm sure that had I gone to them and said, I'd like to go in there, what's the useful purpose? You know, we couldn't come out and talk about that sort of thing and say, well, here's what we saw. First place, somebody would say we were lying, and it would serve no useful purpose, I think. Well, they've kept some pretty good secrets over a period of time, and so I'd have to say that I'd have to believe that secrets like that could be kept.
Getting copies of government UFO documents can also be a daunting task, in spite of the Freedom of Information Act. Simply put, if the government doesn't want you to see a file, you won't.
General Accounting Office is looking into the July 1947 crash retrieval of a disc and alien beings that occurred in July of 1947. Congressman Schiff from New Mexico has been asking the General Accounting Office to investigate the crash because there's been a big cover-up about it for many years.
Congressman Stephen Schiff of New Mexico tried to retrieve records pertaining to the Roswell incident. That was the beginning.
I thought this would be a very routine matter, that I would request from the Defense Department their records. They would provide me what they could. I'd give it to the constituents who asked for it, and that would be the end of it. Unfortunately, this has been anything but routine so far. We've had 3 different explanations from the military about what crashed. The first explanation is it was a flying disc, meaning flying saucer in today's terminology. They changed that and said, we made a mistake. It wasn't a flying disc, it was a weather balloon. I still find it amazing that the United States top bomber wing, with the only wing that was eligible to carry nuclear weapons at that particular time, would not know a weather balloon from a flying saucer.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army. Army officers say the missile, found sometime last week, has been inspected at Roswell, New Mexico, and sent to Wright Field, Ohio, for further inspection. Headline edition will bring you special reports and interviews in a moment.
So, before I explain who this gatekeeper could be, and I'm not really sure this is the person, but hang on tight. I need to explain something that happened before. Now, I was talking about the legacy program being involved in the disclosure process. I was looking up this leak that happened with Signal, and it was Christopher Mellon talking to Sean Kirkpatrick. I couldn't find it on the internet. Maybe people weren't as interested because it was kind of an argument between Sean Kirkpatrick and Christopher Mellon. What was interesting was that got declassified under in Signal. Like, why was Sean Kirkpatrick talking to Christopher Mellon in Signal when you're talking about official government business? Okay, like, you don't do that with Signal when you're discussing government official business, because that's just too shady. Too many things can go wrong. No, that's not how it works. But for some reason, they declassified this when it came to Arrow. And I remember this happened right after Chuck Schumer introduced his legislation, and right when David Grush was about to come out and all this stuff, right? So it was interesting timing. And Mellon and Kirkpatrick are arguing. I'll show you a little bit, but for more information, you need to go to the Black Ball. John Greenwald, he does great work, amazing work. Sometimes I disagree with him. Sometimes I think he does great with, especially documents and all that. The problem is, he's got such a high standard that I feel like sometimes he attacks the people he shouldn't, or not attacks, just, I don't know. I think he means well. I'm not like, I don't know. But sometimes he does disappoint me with his opinion, but that's okay. He still does great work. So, and everybody's entitled to their own opinions. But let me share a little bit of that.
Arrow is authorized to receive all levels of information related to UAP. That was a heck of a memo to go over, but you can see that clearly the DOD, according to them, was reaching out to Grush through various means. Each and every time it was declined, and clearly there was an issue with David Grush, who did not want to come into Arrow. If he didn't set up the meeting and didn't show, I can understand his concern was really the root cause of that. But how is it that he could go all that way, set up the meeting, the time, and just not show? So what happened? Was it under advice of counsel? Maybe, but why wouldn't he have that advice prior? We know who his attorney is, with Charles McCullough, the former ICIG. So clearly he's got an incredibly intelligent attorney behind him. So if it was based on legal counsel, why didn't he get that counsel prior? Because he was clearly proactively, after declining a bunch of invitations, it seems, proactively now reaching out to Arrow and saying, hey, let's chat. And from that memo between November 10 and November 14, there obviously was a telephone conversation, at least one, that set over.
So obviously what happened here, to my opinion, is that Arrow's compromised. They probably know that at this point. David Grush also has a lot of sensitive information. I mean, we're talking about a Manhattan Project on steroids, allegedly. And it would be if you have alien tech. And it would be very sensitive information. And if they're not real serious about getting to the truth, and they've been very shady, and people that have whistles. So this is what I would do. If I was shooting for disclosure, I would set that office up. And I would start with very small amounts of whistleblowers, go in there and see how it goes. What I mean by small is nothing with huge, important, solid evidence or important names, information, whatever, or things that could compromise your sources and methods. Test the waters, see how it goes, start small. I think they did that, and they realized really quickly not only that the whistleblowers weren't treated seriously, but other connections. It's almost like a spy. It's like, I guarantee these people have on both. It's a war. It's like a war. I've said it 1,000 times, with reconnaissance and all that, and finding information and sources and all that. So Rush ended up not testifying on Arrow because Rush does know a lot of stuff, a lot, from what I've heard, and I'm pretty sure he does indeed. And you can see that from the way that he got treated as well. Anyway, back to the signal messages.
Back to Kirkpatrick. It's either a lawyer at the Hill or a lawyer in DOD. Who am I sending them to? Either the law is law or we can scrub having anyone else come see Arrow. So obviously Kirkpatrick's getting a little miffed at this point. Mellon says, you can't tell Chuck to go to various committees on the Hill. It needs to be someone who represents Arrow in the executive branch. I'll support Mellon on that from the little that I do know about this, that yes, that would essentially be who they have to talk to for safety as well. That if the DOD attorneys are going to promise something, then obviously when he goes into the DOD, he's got something to fall back on. Mellon continues, there are a dozen Hill committees on majority and minority counsel who may not even agree. Kirkpatrick, depends on how badly people want this sorted out. Send me Chuck's contact info. Then Mellon says, not without his permission, obviously. How about I relay your contact info here to Chuck? What's interesting is Chuck McAuliffe's information is public on the website.
For some reason, I thought that Chuck that was mentioned in Signal was Chuck Schumer, because this came about that time when the UAP Disclosure Act was getting drafted. But I was wrong. But however, the timing does go in, like Sean Kirkpatrick reached out to Mellon because of all these things, right, that were happening. And I don't know, like I said, it's shady from this whole Signal thing, and that the government would release it.
Here's Luis Elizondo. He's talking about how this Signal thing got declassified and how shady it is. Basically, Chris, I wonder, when did the DOD authorize Kirkpatrick to use Signal app for official U.S. government business and correspondence? You and I would have been crucified for doing that while we were in the government. And when did they allow personal identifiable information of U.S. citizens to be released contrary to the Privacy Act of 1974? I guess it's more of the same. Rules that apply to thee, but not to me. So, who was that group?
He and I had the reports on unidentified anomalous phenomena, and I was looking at I wanted to look through the second report of Arrow, or the first report of Arrow, because I remember clearly where they said 175 unidentifieds, and they said 6 drones, 6 to 12 drones, something like that. The other ones were balloon-like entities, and there was like 300 something about those. Well, it turns out the ODNI had, that website had some issues in the last few weeks, and that report is gone. Since it's mystery drones all around, I wanted to see how many drones were reported, but they took that one off, unfortunately. Anyway, when this was done, Christopher Mellon responds, and he puts out one of his conversations with somebody from the executive branch that was looking into the UAP crash retrieval. And here's what he says.
So here, Chris Mellon releases this after Sean Kirkpatrick and the government releases that through an FOIA, the Signal shady release they did. And it's a conversation in 2020 about a crash retrieval program. They talk about Kingman, Arizona, and he says, we know the management structure and security control systems and ownership of the crash retrieval. We also know who recovers landed or crashed UAPs under what authorities. We also know that a still highly classified memo by the Secretary of the Air Force in the 1950s is still in the effect to maintain the cover on the UAPs. We also know the SES-2, who's the Air Force gatekeeper. Now that SES-2, I'm gonna reveal who I think that might be in the end of the video. And that's thanks to history that's not talked much about, and Jason Somoza did a great job, and this guy fits the criteria perfectly. So let's see who it is, and let's see how that fits. But I think they should update a memo from the 1950s. I mean, we are in 2025 in kind of a different situation. I'll also show you something by Jesse Michaels. Jesse Michaels talked better about this Kingman, Arizona. And please do not forget Leonard Stringfield's work. Leonard Stringfield, Richard Dolan mentioned to him not too long ago. Amazing work.
The whole point of the doomsday machine is lost if you keep it a secret. Why didn't you tell the world, eh?
On the 19th of May, 1953, something extraordinary happened in the Nevada desert. A new kind of nuclear bomb, codenamed Harry, was detonated at the Nevada test site. It unleashed 32 kilotons of energy, twice the power dropped on Hiroshima. The military at the time was running Operation Upshot Knothole, a series of nuclear tests to study how the blasts affected homes, buildings, and infrastructure. But of the dozens of nuclear devices used, it seemed that Harry, which caused the largest blast, might have had an unintended side effect. One of the engineers on site studying all of this data was a decorated World War II veteran named Arthur Stansel.
I can assure you that your name will not be used.
The man had been working as a consultant on blast effects of atom bombs when he was suddenly ordered to report for a new mission.
Along with 15 other specialists, he was ordered to leave his belongings behind. He was flown to Phoenix and transported on a bus with blacked out windows to a classified location near Kingman, Arizona. They were told a secret test vehicle had crashed. His job was to determine its impact velocity.
I accepted it was probably some United States government vehicle, a highly classified vehicle. In fact, we were told that that's what it was.
Under the floodlights, he saw the most exotic craft he had ever seen. It looked like two deep saucers fused together, buried 20 inches in the sand. It was roughly 30 feet in diameter, made of a dull brushed metal material. It had no landing gear, no visible damage, and a small open hatch. Inside a nearby tent, a number of 4-foot-tall humanoid figures laid out on a table. While all of this might sound unbelievable, more evidence of the Kingman crash surfaced recently. Former intelligence official Chris Mellon revealed that this flying saucer had been recovered and studied over the decades since its retrieval. And Stansel himself was no random witness. His record is impeccable. He earned 3 Purple Hearts, a Bronze Star, and after the war began, he sustained a career in physics and engineering at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And a declassified report from Operation Upshot Knothole confirms Stansel was on site for the nuclear testing there. But it's the name mentioned alongside Stansel's, the head of the Special Studies Department at Wright-Patterson, who is much more of a mystery. Dr. Eric Wang. Unlike Stansel, Wang left almost no trace in public records. Despite having his name endow a civil engineering research facility at the University of New Mexico, any other details about what else he might have been doing in his super secretive career are non-existent. Attempts to verify his background lead to nothing. No biographical details, no employment records, no published research. It was as if he had been erased from the records. The mystery of Dr. Wang was picked up in the 1980s by UFO researcher William Steinman. After months of searching, he finally found a clue: an obituary in an old issue of a mechanical engineering magazine. It turned out that Dr. Eric H. Wang, born in 1906, had originally come from Vienna. In fact, he had graduated from Vienna Technical Institute, and there are suggestions that he was a contemporary of Victor Schauberger, the man rumored to have developed a revolutionary propulsion system, perhaps even conceptual flying saucers for the Nazis. Steinman discovered that Wang immigrated to the US before World War II, lectured at the University of Cincinnati, and eventually became head of the Department of Special Studies at Wright-Patterson. In 1956, Wang's department was relocated to New Mexico, to the Sandia Laboratories complex at Kirtland Air Force Base. Steinman hit another dead end, and despite being warned off this trail, he took a different approach. He tracked down Dr. Wang's widow, Maria, and that's when things took a turn. Maria Wang confirmed that her late husband had worked on classified projects at Wright-Patterson, projects that involved technology not of this world. She went even further, claiming that before his death, Eric had confided in her that the US government was studying recovered extraterrestrial craft. But it was Maria's next revelation that was truly shocking. She said that her husband had reported directly to Henry Kissinger.
Thank you. Nice to see you.
All right, so who's the Air Force SES-2 gatekeeper? Well, do you guys remember how Tom DeLonge used to share how he met actual gatekeepers? He's like, the gatekeepers of the universe. I don't know if you guys remember that. He said that multiple times. So we know that he was talking to very high up people because of the WikiLeaks. Now, I'm gonna show you guys something, and I want you guys to follow this person. He is done a great job, really good job, and I hope his channel blows up because it's well deserved. All right, guys, this guy's name's Jason Somoza. Go follow him on YouTube. I will set the link below. And he also names a lot of interesting people connected to Lockheed Martin, connected to other companies. The Lockheed Martin Skunk Works. It was history that I think is very important. All right, before I show you this, I just gotta say this guy is very smart that you're about to see. Very impressive resume, but I don't know, for some reason I imagined Air Force gatekeepers would be like very intimidating, and who knows, looks can be deceiving, right? And maybe this is one of the gatekeepers. It's probably a decent amount, like not a decent amount, but I want to say 12, like MJ12, but there's probably a small number of these people. And yeah, I think this one was definitely match with the SES-2 position here.
Clock hour might not see too many people showing up, but we're all engineers, and I know that we all grew up going to early class and not waiting to noon like the social sciences students. So it's a real treat for me to get to try to outline for you what we are doing in the Air Force Research Laboratory and in our effort to create new choices for our Air Force. Let's see if this is advancing yet. Oh, it's on the side. There we go. I'm sorry. Aha, it's not behind me. The exit criteria for this area of research is the opportunity for the Air Force to evolve the sensing physics of its ISR platforms with the inclusion of things like LiDAR and passive multimode radar, and to take the touch labor, to reduce the touch labor, increase the operating efficiency of intelligence analysts in the field and in our intelligence analyst centers.
Now, that's somewhat awkward, and when I say this, by the way, I don't mean it in a derogatory way. Somewhat an impressive man that you just saw on stage there is someone called General Neil McCasland. And we can say with 99.9% certainty that that is the final person that Tom refers to in his story, where he meets the general, this mysterious person who seems to have deep and profound understanding and responsibility associated with this issue. Now, why can we say that? Well, in the email chain, you can see there's someone called Neil McCasland, and actually Tom refers to him as General Neil McCasland, with a bunch of other emails associated with him that are very interesting and definitely worth a read. Links in the description. So with that connection made pretty clearly, we've got to ask the question, who is this guy? Well, Neil McCaslin has a PhD in aeronautical engineering that he got from MIT, whilst also working with the Air Force. Actually, he held multiple positions in the Air Force, in the NRO, and also in the Pentagon at multiple points in his career, rising up and up and up and up the food chain until he reached the rank of Major General, which, if you don't know, is very, very senior. But arguably, Neil McCaslin's career reached its absolute peak in 2011 to 2013, where he became commander of the Air Force Research Lab, which oversees 12,000 people with a budget of $2.2 billion, where he was basically responsible for the really advanced technical development that goes on for the Air Force. And that was located at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Now, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, huh? Has anyone ever heard of that place before? Well, if you're familiar with the world of ufology, if you're familiar with a lot of the stories and the tales and the anecdotes that have come down to us through multiple generations, then you'll have heard of Wright-Patterson Air Force Base before. This is the place where all of the mysterious UFO stuff seems to happen. So already, when you see General Neil McCaslin, this person's resume sounds connected and related to this subject. But very often when people discuss Neil McCaslin, they stick at that point and they say, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, that's really interesting, that's the headline. And don't get me wrong, that is fascinating. But there is an unsung chapter to this man's career. Just before he was assigned to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Neil McCaslin took on a role at the Pentagon. During that role, he got a promotion which led to him being Director of Special Programs for the Undersecretary of Defense for Logistics, Acquisition, and Technology. That role sounds kind of boring, and you would never look that person up and say, oh wow, what a mysterious, interesting job role that must be connected to UFOs. But by default, the person who does that role becomes the Executive Secretary for the Special Access Programs Oversight Committee. So why does that matter? Well, Special Access Programs are the programs within the Department of Defense, well over 2,000 of them, that no one is supposed to know about. Right? It doesn't matter if you have a top secret clearance. Unless you have a need to know, you won't be read into that program. Very often, the operational budget, the research budget, the functioning budget that's doing the thing the Special Access Program is designed to do is completely neutered in comparison to the enormous security budget. That's because the fundamental requirement with these programs is that no one knows about them. And there's well over 2,000 of them in the United States. They're very expensive to run and they're extremely sensitive. And the whole idea is that only a very small number of people actually know about them, which means that the ultimate end goal is that nobody knows about all the programs or large groups of them. That would subvert the purpose of cutting them up and compartmentalizing them. So here you have someone who is responsible for the oversight committee of these SAPs. Not only responsible, but Neil McCaslin was the executive secretary, which meant that he had a senior role and responsibility in overseeing these programs. So he was one of a tiny, tiny group of people who was given that level of access.
Look, here's the thing. I think there's something really deep when it comes to this. And that's just one potential candidate for an SES-2 gatekeeper. But I think we should have listened to President Eisenhower. And you know what? The lore says that there allegedly was a freaking deal with this president and aliens, and I'm been so skeptical to that my whole life. My whole life. I mean my whole life in ufology, since I started this in 2020 when I really started doing research. I didn't start becoming open to that till David Grush said deals, but and then Carl Nell said it, covert agreements, and then Jim Semivan said it too in James Langdoley, and then you look at what happened to Eisenhower that day, and it was weird, but there's not much there. I mean, I know about his granddaughter, and I don't know. This problem with this topic, a lot of it gets so weird and crazy that I got to keep one foot in reality, but I'm not gonna dismiss it, because that would be a great counterintelligence tactic if that was a entity that's non-human. And I don't know, maybe I would want to keep most of humanity asleep to this. I would want most people to be skeptical, and that's a good way. Make stories so absurd that nobody will believe them. But that's a whole nother thing. Was there a deal? That's a big question, and I think there could have been one, and I know this sounds crazy, but that could be a big reason for the secrecy. One of them. The other one could be the contractors, the defense contractors, and you know, the whole suing thing, and I don't know, there's a lot. There's so much. But we deserve the truth. I think it could unite us. I think it could heal us. And this is such important history that I think it's messed up. Nobody has the right to keep this information from us. And I don't know. That's all I got. But the fact that the president said this is crazy. Especially from a person with his resume, his military career and all that. Why would he say this? And should have we taken him seriously? Because I think we're 65 years late. So I wonder how much power the military-industrial complex now has. You know, we know it took off after World War II. That's when it blew up, and you know, we're 65 years late. That's pretty late. So what breakaways what discoveries have they made? How much power do they have? And how far will they go to keep the secret? Whoever is gatekeeping this, is there a breakaway civilization? Look at what Russ Colhart reported in Arizona on the underground stuff and the petroglyphs, and I'm not going to go on a tangent. That's not what this episode is about. Have a good one, guys.
Our military organization today bears little relation to that known of any of my predecessors in peacetime, or indeed by the fighting men of World War II or Korea. Until the latest of our world conflicts, the United States had no armaments industry. American makers of plowshares could, with time and as required, make swords as well. But we can no longer risk emergency improvisation of national defense. We have been compelled to create a permanent armaments industry of vast proportions. Added to this, 3.5 million men and women are directly engaged in the defense establishment. We annually spend on military security alone more than the net income of all United States corporations. Now, this conjunction of an immense military establishment and a large arms industry is new in the American experience. The total influence, economic, political, even spiritual, is felt in every city, every state house, every office of the federal government. We recognize the imperative need for this development, yet we must not fail to comprehend its grave implications. Our toil, resources, and livelihood are all involved. So is the very structure of our society. In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic processes. We should take nothing for granted. Only an alert and knowledgeable citizenry can compel the proper meshing of the huge industrial and military machinery of defense with our peaceful methods and goals, so that security and liberty may prosper together.